So we have done some literary review on Run and Learn STEM as a concept. And within that literary review, we discovered how movement as interaction actually hasn't been investigated within a mobile app context, which is why that is exactly what we have been doing.
Within the Run and Learn concept, we chose to work with a STEM topic, astronomy. STEM is the abbreviation for science, technology, engineering and mathematics, and we chose astronomy because it allows to have movement in a game. With this, for instance, we can exemplify the distances between planets. We broke down the Run and Learn concept into two parts, running and learning. In the first phase of the project, we established a framework that enables running and its analysis. Movement patterns can be broken down into trajectories, vectors, networks, and flows. Each have certain uses and drawbacks, but in our case, analysis of the trajectories is sufficient since we are investigating the general movement of many individuals. To get a bigger picture, it's possible to represent movement through heat maps and space-time cubes. Heat maps offer a density location-based visual representation. In our case, heat maps can be used to reveal which places players primarily visit in the real world, if there are any. A space-time cube is a 3D representation of movement in space and time. Two axes show the position of the individuals, and the vertical axis represents time. This can give a good overview of individual player movement and represent flow with an additional axis for more telling analysis. We created an application to evaluate two different spatial setups and two feedback variations. The application was set at the school's sports field and was designed so the Sun and the first 4 planets of the solar system could fit inside it. The celestial bodies were designed to revolve and have realistic textures. Their scale also represents their real-life equivalent, apart from the Sun, which would be 100 times bigger. The distance between planets was also scaled according to real life. The planets and the player's character were placed in the field's area shown above a customized map. We created 2 spatial setups to analyze, linear and scattered. The linear version has the planets one after another in a straight line, while in the scattered one they are distributed around the field. When players get into the proximity of planets, they become interactable. Players have to click on the screen to take a better look at the planets, see their scientific data, and later, in the second learn phase of the project, really interact with them. When a player enters such a zone, 1 or 2 types of feedbacks are given, depending on whether the vibration is being tested or not. The planets glow. This is a visual cue players get in all cases. However, since we wish to investigate the possible impact of added haptic feedback, vibration, half of the participants also receive such feedback when entering an interactive area. The application constantly recorded players' position and also logged the time and distance passed from entering into an interactive area to see if those who have the haptic feedback react faster compared to those who don't. During evaluation, 60 participants were tested. 30 tried the linear, 30 the scattered spatial setup. 15 out of both groups had haptic feedback enabled, 15 didn't. Here you can see the screen recording of a participant trying the linear version of the game. After receiving instructions, participants were started with an offset in order to avoid flocking. They were also given different setups each, so the positions of the planets were not at the same place in their games. This is the screen recording of another participant trying the scattered setup of the game. The tests ended when participants interacted with all 5 celestial bodies, or when 15 minutes have passed. Participants could track their progress with the checklist on the left side of the screen and saw planets information on the right. The linear and scattered spatial setups show different kinds of movement patterns. According to trajectory mapping, the linear is simpler with fewer decision points but with more radical changes, while the scattered one is more complex with more decision points but with more subtle changes. According to the heat maps, in both versions there were more frequented areas around the planets, and the scattered one was more widespread across the sports field. Lastly, based on the space-time cube mapping, it can be stated that the visit order of the planets varied in both cases. For feedback, There was a significant difference between the two versions, but surprisingly, the one without the haptic feedback was faster.
In case of the feedback test, the time values was often less than a fifth of a second, so rainy weather could have influenced the touchpad and obstructed some of the data. There was big variation between the weather the 3 different days. The first day was rainy, the second day was sunny, and the third day was windy. There was also a big difference between the different classes. The first class was very calm and patient. The second and third class was more impatient and spontaneous, running around with the tablets. When asked about the application, the participants asked if they could download it and call it fun. Next up is the second learn part of the project. We have seen how the movement patterns is influenced by the different setups, and we have concluded that the scattered version is more interesting as it has more decisions where we can add different tasks to. We have used heat maps to see how the participants move around the planets and can use this to keep the students inside the assigned area.